cool down live. I think we're live. We should be live. Welcome to everyone watching on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube after the fact as well. Welcome to the live chat. A few people have come over, streaming on the Cool Down Podcast channel, obviously, because this is a Cool Down Podcast, but it's a Cool Down Podcast with a difference, because it's not a guest, it's just me talking about testing. I figured, why not? Long format, don't really want to make this into a video. I've got my notes, I've got my graphics. Let's have a little chat. Welcome everyone. Little bit late because, look, it's me, okay? This is what I do. If you're watching after the fact, then it doesn't matter, okay? Because you can watch this whenever you like, or you can watch this live. Welcome everyone who's in the live chat. Thank you all for coming. So, testing 2022. A lot of anticipation going into it for sure, and all in all, I think it delivered. So I've created some nice graphics that you will be able to see if you're watching on YouTube, watching the live stream. You won't be able to see if you're listening, but it's fine. We'll talk through everything. I've got my notes, I've all set up. We'll go through all 10 teams, talk about their testing, who I think had the best time, who I think had the worst time, and then we'll talk about, obviously, there's other stuff to talk about. We'll talk about at the end in terms of Haas and their future and what's going on, because obviously a lot of that is up in the air at the minute. So, once again, thank you all for coming. Let's get in to testing. And what a test. A lot of laps on the board from the teams. 3,124 laps in total of the Circuit de Catalunya de Barcelona, whatever you want to call it. The typical home of F1 testing. Obviously, Bahrain is starting to kind of get in on the act, and we're going to Bahrain in end of next week, isn't it? But Barcelona is the historical home of testing, which obviously the teams know Barcelona like the back of their hand. So I think it's a good place to come with the new cars because there's less unknowns. They know what to look at, what to not look at in regards to kind of circuit differences. But yeah, 3,124 laps in total. 439 from the boys at Ferrari, from Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz, 236 laps, which is equivalent to just over 3.5 full Grand Prix distances of the Spanish Grand Prix. That's a lot of Grand Prix, and only 160 for Haas, which, look, we hoped Haas wouldn't be down towards the bottom of any of the tables after last season, and they are again. Now, obviously, there's potentially more to it than just the car. We will get into that. But yeah, compared to last season, I crunched the numbers. So in Bahrain last year, we had 3,725 laps in total in testing for 2021, which is equal to 20,160 kilometers. Here, 3,124, which is equivalent to 14,605. So we had about 75, just under 75%, the amount of laps, the amount of distance completed by the cars this year compared to last year. But last year, every single team in testing in 2021 did at least 300 laps. And do you know what team did the least laps in 2021? It was Mercedes, funnily enough, 304. But they still won the Constructors' title. So maybe Haas have got a chance. Who knows? But yeah, you had Alfa Romeo particularly and Haas. They were kind of outliers in terms of amount of laps. They had quite a few less. But good lappage from Ferrari, good lappage from Williams, good lappage from Red Bull, Mercedes. We'll get into all of them in the details. But yeah, pretty decent showing. New regulation. I mean, 2014, the last time we had a big regulation shift, there were cars breaking down left, right and centre. Didn't have anywhere near as much running as maybe we should have. But not too bad this year. Obviously, the engine's broadly the same. Obviously updated for a lot of teams, but broadly the same mechanically. But you've still got a lot of things. You've got the porpoising. I mean, who'd heard of a porpoise? Had anyone live chat heard of a porpoise before this? I'd never heard of a porpoise, but I have now heard of a porpoise. Porpoising is a thing, all the ventilation stuff. So obviously we saw Vettel and Alonso pulled up with, I don't know if it was related to cooling exactly, but we had a lot of teams testing out ventilation on these new fancy side pods. They don't all look quite as beautiful as the Ferrari, but yeah, there's plenty of variety around the grid, and the Flovies as well, which made the Williams look like it had just done a massive dutty sneeze all over itself. But there you go. Yeah, most of you lot in live chat hadn't heard of a porpoise. Only Anurag and Mr. Miyagi had heard of a porpoise, which, fair play. I mean, I'm not like aquatic mammals. Is it a mammal? I don't know. It's not my speciality, okay? But it is weird. It's a weird one, isn't it? And apparently they were saying that some of the teams were having to kind of cut the back edge of their floors to try and minimise the porpoising. I mean, ultimately, if the car goes quick, even with porpoising, the team bosses will be like, you know what? You're just going to have to deal with it. Deal with the bone shaking and just crack on with your porpoising Formula 1 car. But it happens in other formulas when it comes to ground effect, when it comes to aero that's being generated underneath the body of the car. Porpoising, apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently that's quite a common thing. Who knew? Not this guy. But anyway, more numbers. Should we look at some more numbers? I think we should look at some more numbers. So, the quickest times. Lewis Hamilton, 1:19.138 was the quickest time set over the 3 days of testing. It's a Mercedes 1-2. At a glance, you might think, Tomo, it's the same. It's the same. Same shit, different day. Well, come on. Let's reserve judgment. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, because there is context to these numbers, okay? And bear in mind the compounds, okay? C5 for Hamilton, C5 for Russell, C4 for Perez, C3 for Leclerc. The higher the number, the softer, the stickier the tyre, the quicker the tyre. So a C5 would be, because obviously, unless you might not know this, but basically, depending on the track, depending on the conditions, a C4 might be classed as a medium tyre, and then a C5 a soft, and then a C3 a hard, or you might have C2 a hard, C3 medium, C4 soft. Depends on the track you go to, right? And obviously these are new tyres, these are new 18-inch low-profile tyres for this year, right? So obviously the difference between compounds, I don't think anyone's really sure. The C5, the higher the number, the quicker the tyre. We know that. But what's the actual difference, okay? Because you see, like, Sergio Perez done a 1:19.556. George Russell, 1:19.233. Russell's on a C5, Sergio's on a C4. What is the difference between the two tyres? Look, I don't know about you, live chat. Any suggestions? Because I've been hearing between half a second and over a second. I'm like 1.2. That's the range I'm hearing. But obviously, if they were the same tyres as last season, you could be like, okay, what were the differences last season? Carry that over. But because these tyres are new, the compounds are new, the thickness is new, all of that's new, we don't know. We don't know what the difference is between the C5, between the C4. Maybe it's the same differences. Maybe there's a bigger difference between certain compounds. That's the mystery that goes into this. That's the mystery. And obviously as well, you've got to bear in mind that this is over 3 days. 3 days of testing. So different temperature, different wind speed, different slipstream. There's so much context to these numbers. It's very difficult to actually, gauge exactly where everyone's sitting. But yeah, Hamilton quickest at 1:19.138. Then George Russell, 1:19.233, both on the C5 compound. Perez, 1:19.556 on the C4, and Norris did a 0.568. It's only 12 thousandths behind Sergio Perez on the same compound in the McLaren, which is kind of exciting to see. Leclerc, 0.689 on the C3, so an even harder compound. And then Verstappen, 0.756 also on the C3. And again, I put on the graphic. If you can see it on YouTube, great. If you can't, if you're just listening, don't worry. Lewis Hamilton, pole position time at Catalunya, 2021, a 1:16.741. Now, question for live chat. How much, based off what we've seen, because you've got to bear in mind, with testing, no one's absolute low fuel, gunning it on the stickiest compound, going hell for leather, engine turned up to the max, right? Now, given Lewis has done a 1:19.1, okay, and we can assume he was pushing but not pushing, right? And last season, 1:16.7. What do we think the gap is? What do we think the average gap, based off what we've seen, between this season, this new 2021 car, 2022 car, sorry, and the last season 2021 car? Because for me, and I was looking into it, so Catalunya, Spanish Grand Prix in 2021, in Q1, the quickest times we were getting in Q1 were low 1:18s in Q1, where people were on soft tyres, but is the necessity to push full send to turn the engine 100% up there? No. So I would say we're no more than 2 seconds away from where we were last year. I reckon below 2, maybe 1.5 to 2 seconds, which a few of you have said actually. Abhinav 2 seconds, Gali a second maybe, Annie 1.5 to 2.2. Yeah, that's pretty much where I think it's going to be. The gap between this year and last year, by what we've seen. Because again, it's not fair to compare these lap times to Q3 2021 Spain, because Q3, again, low fuel, max engine, super understanding of the car, full send, right? It's not fair to make that direct comparison, but when we take in the additional context, I think we can make, I think 1.5 to 2 seconds. And by the end of the season, I'd be surprised if we're not within, a second. Look, obviously, Catalunya is a relatively, it's kind of a mid-length track, isn't it? The quicker tracks, you get in lap times in the low 1 minutes, like 1:05, like Hungary, Austria. But then the longer tracks, like your Suzukas, where you're getting like 1:40s and that. So I think Catalunya kind of sits in the middle in terms of total lap time, because obviously that makes a difference as well. And these cars are just as, if not, I'm not sure of the speed traps actually, I didn't check, but these cars are just as, if not quicker than they were last season as well, because of course the way the aero is generated means less drag, which is good for straight line speed, but not as good for if you want a bit of slipstream. So bear that in mind as well moving forward. But yeah, all in all, pretty good. Obviously, is it a bit of a shame to see the top 4 teams from last season all accounted for and only accounted for in this top 6? It's a bit of a shame. And is it a coincidence? No. They're probably the 4 strongest teams in Formula 1. It is good to see Lando up there on a C4 as well, not even a C5. That looks promising for McLaren. It would have been nice to see, a Williams or Aston Martin pop up in this quickest times. But we did have, Vettel in the Aston Martin did make it into the 1:19s. We'll get onto the detailed breakdown in a minute, but that was on the C5 as well. So you got to take that additional context into mind. As for the slowest times, well, the names we're seeing down here typically are pretty samey, but you know what? You've got to give credit where credit is due. No Nikita Mazepin in the bottom 6, which, considering how far off the pace he was last year, his quickest time was quicker than Mick's and quicker than Yuki's, and I'm pretty sure it was on the C3 as well. So he isn't even down here, which, credit where credit is due. But yes, what can we learn from this? I think we can learn that Alfa Romeo, it's looking a bit tough. Didn't have many laps, neither did Haas. But there's more of an excuse for Haas, as far as I'm concerned. A bit concerning for Alfa Romeo. A bit concerning for Alfa Romeo. Lance Stroll, 121.9, but on the C2, the only driver of anyone to set their quickest time on the hard tyre, the C2, which is typically the hard tyre. And no one ran the C1 as far as I'm aware. Does the C1 even exist? Is that just an intermediate? I don't even know. But yeah, everyone else in here on C3. So no one in this bottom 6 went for a sticky tyre quick lap by the looks of it. Because you've got to remember as well, just because you're running a quicker tyre, okay, so just say you've got 2 teammates who are both running C4s and one teammate is a second quicker than the other, doesn't mean like one of them could have been doing push laps on the C4 and one of them could have been doing long laps on the C4 to see how it deals with, time. So again, there's all this additional context. We don't know what the plans are that the teams are going into. But I think the biggest kind of positives you can take from certain teams is that do they have a clear plan and are they sticking to it? And that's where, amongst all the teams you can see on this screen here, I think AlphaTauri had a plan, stuck to it. Gasly did crash, but we'll talk about that. Binned it in on day 3, which was a shame for him. But Aston Martin as well, I think they have a clear plan and they seem to be delivering on that quite well. So no massive surprises here. No massive surprises here in terms of the teams. But again, it would have been nice to see. It would have been nice to see some of the top 10. If, a Mercedes or a Red Bull down in the top 6 would have been interesting. But also no Williams in the top 6, which is a positive for them. And also, Robert Kubica, such a shame for Robert. Like, obviously, he's a part of that team. He brings in the Orlen money, which is obviously one of the biggest sponsors on the Alfa Romeo. And he only managed 2 proper laps. I think he managed 9 technically, but there were only 2 laps where he could actually go for it and actually get any meaningful time out of the car. So I didn't include him because his best time was like a 1:25, which is not obviously representative. But yeah, seeing Bottas down there in the Alfa Romeo. Look, you can't take too much away from testing, but at the same time, doesn't look great, does it? Doesn't look great. Right, is there anything else I haven't covered? Because what I think we're going to do now is go through the teams one by one. Yeah, I think we should do that now. Do you reckon that sounds good? Let's do it. So, live chat. Help me out here. Which team do you think, live chat, had the... Or actually, maybe we should just... Let's let live chat decide in which order we go in. So, which team should we look at first, everyone? Although I will be reserving Haas will be the last team we talk about, regardless, because obviously there's more to talk about with Haas at the end. So, which team should we talk about first, chat? Merc? Anurag, you said it. So let's talk about Merc first. Mercedes. Mercedes-Benz. Russell, 119.233, C5. Hamilton, 119.136, C5. 209 laps for George. 184 laps for Sir Lewis Hamilton. Great mileage from both drivers. George over 200 laps in the car. It's a good thing. Okay? It's a good thing to see for him. And all in all, his times were looking quick over the course of the weekend as well. Decent showing from George. And look, this is the thing. Because they set both their lap times on the C5, I'm not overly convinced. Because again, we go back. If we go back to the quickest times, Lewis. If we're saying the difference between the compounds, let's be generous. Let's be generous and say it's half a second. I think it's more than that, but let's say it's half a second. Well, then Leclerc was 2 compounds lower than Lewis and only went half a second slower. So that implies that Leclerc's half a second quicker. So But again, there's so much. We can only read what we see. And ultimately, it was a good showing from Mercedes. But do they look the strongest team? In my opinion, they do not. In my opinion, they do not look like the slowest team. The quickest team, sorry. They don't look like the slowest team either. But do they look as quick as the Ferrari and the Red Bull? I would doubt, personally. But we'll see. We're going to see plenty. The thing is, we know we're going to see plenty of changes going into Bahrain. So let's all steady on, right? Let's all calm our farms, our respective farms. Okay, let's calm it down. All right, I'm not going to ask you lot because everyone just says lots of different teams. We'll go on to the team I think did the best job in testing, which is Ferrari. And the times don't say everything, you know, because I think the most important thing from testing is mileage, okay? And yes, science didn't even break into the 119s on the C3 tyre. But on the C3 tyre, medium, 0.3 off of Verstappen on that same tyre and about 0.4 off of Leclerc. But again, was science going for more long running? Leclerc going for more quick running? Maybe. But ultimately, both drivers over 200 laps. That's amazing. That's a great thing. That's a beautiful thing. The car's a beautiful thing. It's a quick thing, clearly. Look, their aggressive design direction seems to have paid dividends. What can I say? It's looking good for the Maranello boy. And you've got to remember as well, I think a component in all of this is the fact that Ferrari, you know, who finished 6th in 2020 in the Constructors' Championship. 6th. Mad. Because the car wasn't very good. Neither driver, particularly Vettel, could get performances out of that car. But maybe the long game, maybe that extra bit of CFD aero time has paid dividends for them finishing so low in 2020. Maybe. Who knows? Not this guy. I don't know. But maybe. It makes sense. Because they got more CFD aero time. Just saying. It's looking good for Ferrari. I'm not going to, because a lot of people have said they think Ferrari are going to be top tier. Okay, I've been saying this for a while. I'm not going to be like, I was the first person to say Ferrari were great. Okay, we don't know yet. They might be terrible. Okay, this might be a false dawn. But Ferrari looking good. And then my second team, the team that I think was the second most impressive of any team, wasn't Mercedes. We've already talked about Mercedes. But was Red Bull. Now, obviously, a lot of talk going into the test because it was the first time we actually saw the proper Red Bull car, right? First time we've actually seen it properly. Now, obviously, Adrian Newey, they've gone aggressive with the design of the side pods. There's a lot of intricacies going on there, which is what a more developed car looks like. Ultimately, just because it looks complicated, does it mean it's going to be quick? No, not necessarily. But if you want the quickest car, it's not going to be a simple body design. Okay, it's going to have these little intricacies. It's going to have, and it looks pretty well developed. This Red Bull. So look, the times look good. Verstappen, a 10th off of Leclerc on the same compound. 206 laps for Max as well. You know, it's a 10th. It's a 10th around a 1 minute 20 track. It's good. And then Sergio up there as well, slightly quicker, but on a slightly better compound tyre. And again, given, I think in these cars this year, I think Verstappen and Perez, 2-3 tenths, I think Max is ahead of Sergio. I think that's the realistic gap between them two drivers. Because Sergio, there's a lot of Sergio slander that's gone around after his year relative to Max. This is what Max does, okay? He takes drivers who, Pierre Gasly, very good driver at Toro Rosso, slaps him up and Gasly gets slander. Same happens to Albon. Same happened to Sergio. Sergio was like driver of the year 2020. Okay, Sergio's a very, 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 very quick man, and yeah, I think 2 to 3 tenths is about right. The gap between the two. So yeah, I think these lap times these lap times check out, and 152 laps for Sergio. Good bit of running, not a terrible bit of running, not amazing, but not bad. I think Red Bull looking good. Red Bull fans out there should be quietly optimistic. But what has been very nice to see, because actually here's one live chat. When was the last time we saw 4 teams actually be able to challenge for a world title? When was the last time we saw that? 4 teams actually with the package to challenge. Because McLaren looking good. Again, Lando's quickest time, 1:19.568 on the C4 compound. Very, very close to Sergio's quickest time on the same compound. 12 thousandths between them on the same compound. Pretty much ran the same amount of laps as Sergio as well, 155. So does that imply that the Red Bull and the McLaren look about as fast as each other? Maybe. That would be sick. Now, obviously, yes, Ricciardo, 120.288 on the C4, 212 laps for Daniel. This tells me, I'm giving benefit of the doubt here. Was Lando probably going for the quicker times and Daniel probably going for more long runs? Probably. That would make sense to me. But yeah, as you say, live chat, 2012 was the last time we really saw 4 different teams challenging for a championship. You know what I mean? And could this be the year where McLaren and Ferrari, relative to last year anyway, step up and actually take the fight? From what we've seen so far, there is everything to suggest that is the case. And it's been 10 years since 2012. It would be nice to see it again. 8 different drivers in a car that can win races on merit. At least, hopefully more. But at least. But yeah, so, I mean, it's looking decent. No technical issues, as far as I was aware anyway, with McLaren. Package looks strong. Andreas Seidel knows what he's doing. You know I love him. We'll see. We will see. Okay. So, for me, those kind of 4 teams, it felt like they were kind of clear of the pack in testing. But, just like last year, we've got another kind of little glug of teams that sit kind of in this kind of midfield battle. I'm not coining this because we've talked about midfield for ages, all right? This little next glug of teams is 3 teams, seemingly, starting, and all of these had very similarly good tests. AlphaTauri, Yuki Tsunoda, 121.6, not quick, but on a C3, 121 laps. Again, I'm assuming pushing for long run pace. Would have wanted more laps in the car. He's had that's just over half the amount of laps that Carlos Sainz had in the AlphaTauri, in the Ferrari, for Yuki in the AlphaTauri, which obviously the more the merrier, right? Especially for a young driver like Yuki. So not amazing there, but Gasly getting into 119s on the C4 compound as well, 187 laps. You know what I think about Pierre? The grave is different. He's an incredible driver. Looks good. AlphaTauri looks decent. They've obviously borrowed components from my throat is gone, man. So when you talk non-stop for 30 minutes, that's why I've got some water on hand. Yeah. Look, Gasly's looking good. The car looks a lot better in real life than it did in the renders because there's more contrast there, which I thought was good. But yeah, I think Gasly's looking strong. The AlphaTauri package is looking decent. Again, when you compare Gasly's C4 time to, let's have a look at Lando's C4 time, there's 3.5 tenths between them, which I don't think Lando's 3.5 tenths quicker than Gasly on pace. I think the McLaren is a slightly better car, seemingly. But have we really got enough to make that? Probably not, but I'm just looking at what we have. Gasly did bin it. That is true, Theo. He did bin it, which took away lap time from the end of their day 3, which was obviously a shame because he would have got more laps in than this. He probably would have gone over 200, you'd imagine. And he was obviously pushing hard. That implies that he was probably giving it some, you know what I mean? He was probably sending it fully. But yeah, overall, I think AlphaTauri can be pretty happy. Again, yes, Tsunoda could have done with a bit more lappage and Gasly did bin it, but I think you'd rather a driver bin it than the car just break. But then I suppose testing is when you want the car to break, because then you find out the problems. You know what I mean? But anyway, not bad from AlphaTauri, pretty good. But another team who I was very impressed by, I was very happy about, of course, it's Williams. Yes, Alex Albon, 207 laps. The poor kid's just had a whole year out the sport, and then they stuck him in the car for 207 laps, which is like over 3 Grand Prix distances over 3 days. Poor Alex. Pray for Alex in the chat, please. Come on. But 120.3 on the C4 compound, so that's 4 tenths slower than Gasly. Exactly 4 tenths slower than Gasly. That was early. 4 tenths slower than Gasly on the same compound. How much was he pushing? We don't know. But again, what matters most in testing is laps, and very good laps from both the Williams boys. 207 laps for Alex, 120.318 on the C4, 140. I said 207 for Alex now. 140 for Nicholas, 120.699 also on the C4. So just over 3 tenths between the teammates. But again, maybe Alex was pushing more than Nicholas. Hard to say. We don't know. But yeah, all in all, they can be pretty satisfied with that. And look, I expect Alex will be quicker than Nicholas whenever they've come up against each other head to head. Alex has, been quicker than Nicholas. But this is, Nicky's 3rd season in F1. Alex's 3rd season in F1 after a little break. And I'm excited. And I think that Williams looks so much better in real life than it does in the actual car. Oh, Ray J, you're right. I'm gassed that Alex is back, but also I do feel sorry for his neck. After 3 days, 3 full Grand Prix distances in a row, just over. Actually, no, it's about exactly, because Spanish Grand Prix is 66 laps. So 207 divided by 66 is just over 3. But there you go. Does he have the minerals? Remains to be seen, Daniel. Remains to be seen. Right? Remains to be seen. And then the final team that I think had a good test, and this little glug of AlphaTauri, Williams, and Aston Martin, because yes, Vettel did get into the 119s. It was on the C4 tyre, 5 tyre, the quickest tyre, C5. 119.824, 174 laps. Lance Stroll on the C2, so the hard tyre. So obviously going for very, very different run plans, which is good to see. It implies that there's some kind of thinking going on here. 121.9. So, a good 2 seconds behind Sebastian, but on 3 compounds harder tyres. 122 laps for Lance. So not loads. Not a ton of laps. But a good amount. And given that he was on the hard tyres, it's not bad. And yes, I don't remember seeing Mike crack at all, which I was disappointed about King Race. I was disappointed about that as well. We only saw, we didn't see Mike Crack. We saw Otmar for Alpine. Fuming. But yeah, look, I think obviously Vettel's C5 time compared to Hamilton's C5 time, we're looking over half a second between the Aston Martin and the Mercedes. But, you know, did someone have slipstream? Were they running slightly differently? We don't know. But from what we can see, suggests that, you know, Mercedes are clear of Aston, which we'd expect. And I think Aston, as much as they've talked a big game long term, like, they're not selling too much of a dream, I don't think anyway, in the short term. They've tried to kind of level expectations for now, hopefully building on something bigger and better in the future. We will see. It remains to be seen. Wouldn't it be appropriate to show Crack in the paddock? It's true. But there we go. So that's the kind of first 7 teams. So we've got our kind of top 4, kind of our middle 3. And then we've got our bottom 3. And unfortunately, and look, I know my kind of early out there prediction was that Alpine would produce a race-winning car. Well, based off of testing in Barcelona, not looking great. Not the most laps. What? So you got Esteban Ocon, 125 laps. Fernando Alonso, 139. So that's 264 laps between them. Yes, I can do maths. That's right, isn't it? Yeah, I'm sure that's right. Not the most laps, not the least, but not the most. And then lap time wise, both on C3s, 122.1 for Ocon, 121.2 for Alonso. So almost a second between them. But again, was Alonso going more push? Was Ocon doing more saving? Hard to say. But then also, they didn't have any working DRS, as far as I understand anyway, from what I've read. They didn't have working DRS. They should be ready for Bahrain with the DRS, but it's not great. It's not ideal. L plan without the E. And Fernando's engine went up in smoke, didn't it? Very dramatic smoke images, which I know Jimmy tweeted about it, saying, what was the tweet that Jimmy did? I can't actually remember. It was a funny tweet though. It was something like, "El plan is failing," or whatever. I can't even remember. El plan in ruin. Look, it's too early to say, but it's not been the strongest start from Alpine, which I'm gutted about because you lot know I really want Alpine to do well, okay? I'm very, very much on the Alpine train. As well as Williams, obviously, for obvious reasons. But Alpine, I want them to do well, even though I don't like the livery. I'll be honest, don't like the livery. And it's not been a great start. They didn't go on a C4 or a C5. They didn't go for a soft tyre push, but not looking the best for a team that's spoken a lot recently. There's been a lot of change. Obviously, Prost out the door, Bukowski out the door, Otmar coming in, but it's going to take a while for Otmar to kind of insert his way of doing things. We'll see. We'll have to see with Alpine. We'll have to see. But not terrible. Still not terrible. Not as bad, anyway, as the final 2 teams. Which, annoyingly, they're the 2 worst teams of last year. Which is annoying. But Alfa Romeo, only 54 laps for Bottas. The fewest laps of any driver, apart from Kubica. But, you know, it wasn't his fault. 54 laps. Bottas raced every day of testing, all 3 days, and he still only managed 54 laps, which is really bad, especially for a new driver coming in. The more seat time, the better, right? Especially in these new cars as well. So it's a pretty not ideal. Not ideal for Valtteri. 122.288 on the C3 compound. Can we read too much into the times? Not really. I mean, Joe went, 4/10 quicker on the same compound, but you can't tell me that Joe's quicker than Bottas. Okay, that's just not the case, clearly. 112 laps for Guan Yu Zhou. So that is a small silver lining from it all. But yeah, it's mad that like Bottas did so few laps, and when Kubica was in his seat or in the car, he only managed 2 proper laps. Alfa Romeo did not have a good test. That's very fair to say. Okay, Alfa Romeo had a stinker, but I'm glad that Guan Yu Zhou got some lap time in. New driver coming in, only rookie of the year. He needs the lap time, and he got 112. Isn't bad. That's 2 Grand Prix. That's 2 full Spanish Grand Prix that Guan Yu Zhou drove. Good, solid, all right. But yeah, all in all, as much as the car looks fantastic, the Alfa Romeo, not this camo livery. This camo livery is awful, but the real car looks great. But yeah, all in all, Alfa Romeo not great, which is frustrating. It's so frustrating. I've said this so many times. They haven't finished higher than P8 for 8 years, and the way this is going, it's gonna be 9 years. It's annoying. It's annoying to me, but there you go. Shame for Alfa, but we'll crack on, because there was one team to save their blushes, and it was Haas. Now look, between the 2 drivers, 89, 71 laps. Yeah, only 3 drivers put in double-figure lap times. Sorry, not lap times, lap counts. Bottas, Schumacher, Mazepin. Both the Haas drivers only managing sub 89 laps for Schumacher, 71 for Mazepin. The times, 121.9 for Mick, 121.5 for Nikita. Not awful. Hard to say. It's hard to say. Again, when you look... So look, Schumacher's done a 121.9 on a C3. Mazepin 121.5 on a C3. Now, that's a medium tyre. It's not great. It's not great. But yeah, again, do we know the context? Was Mick doing long runs? Was Nikita doing quick runs? Or vice versa? Like, we don't know. We don't know. But all in all, testing is all about number of laps, especially, this is the thing, especially with this new generation of car, completely fresh sheet of paper. You need the laps, and they didn't get the laps. Between the 2 of them, they had way less laps than Carlos Sainz on his own, 236 laps. These 2, between them, 160. And then Ferrari had, 236 just with Sainz, and then over 200 with Leclerc as well. That's the thing. That's the problem. But yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, obviously, the CFD aero time meant that Haas had a lot of time to put into developing this car in CFD. But nothing replaces real-world testing. Nothing can replace real-world testing. And they kind of dropped the bomb a bit. But obviously, it's a mixture of, Haas. Actually, what's funny? Don't look it up. To everyone in the live chat, to everyone listening, say in your mind, who did the most laps in testing in 2021? So this time last year, when we were in Bahrain testing, who did the most laps? Do you think? Which team do you think did the most laps? So I've already said that Mercedes did the fewest laps with 304. I'd say it's like joint most laps. Actually, I'm just gonna double check this number before I put fake news out into the world. But I'm pretty sure I remember where I found this total. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, there's 2 teams, but one of the teams is more surprising than the other, who did the most laps in testing last year, which is ironic. Which is very ironic, considering that it was Alfa Romeo. They did 422 laps. And also, AlphaTauri, they also did 422 laps last season. But Alfa Romeo did the most laps in testing, joint most laps in testing last year. Yeah, I did kind of line that up for Haas, didn't I? But it wasn't Haas. But again, the range in 2021, 422 for Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri, 304 for Mercedes is lap count at Bahrain test in 2021. This year, like we've already looked at the start. Most laps, Ferrari 439, least laps, Haas 160. So those two teams at the bottom, Haas and Alfa Romeo, really dragged the overall amount of laps down, unfortunately. But yeah, all in all, again, considering the size of the change going into this year, pretty good. Pretty good in terms of the amount of laps done. It's just, yeah, Haas and Alfa Romeo and Alpine were definitely seem to be the three biggest losers from testing in 2022. But yeah, obviously, we now have to talk about the inevitable, don't we? Which is what's next for Haas. Because, as we all know, what's going on at the moment, the Russian attacks on Ukraine and the sanctions that have been brought against Russia around the world, and the consistent, what's the best way of putting it, distance that companies and organisations and, you know, UEFA, the FIA, is putting between themselves and Russian businesses, Russian athletes, etc., etc. Obviously, things kicked off in a big way. Day 3, wasn't it? Well, no, it was day 2 when the invasion appeared to start, and obviously it's something that's obviously been going on for a long time now. But that's kind of the point that things seem to kind of begin, and then Haas pretty much straight away took the Uralkali logos off of the car, of the Haas. And I think to anyone watching, listening, who maybe doesn't understand the exact... So I'll go through kind of my understanding of why this was particularly significant. Now, obviously, last year, we all know that the Haas 2021 car, the livery was very, very Russian flag. And there was a lot of controversy around that because Russia had been... So for the Olympics, for example, the Winter Olympics, Russian athletes could not compete under the Russian flag. It had to be the Russian Olympic Committee, ROC. And Nikita last year, and it would have been the same for Kvyat if he was in the sport last year, he raced under the RAF, the Russian Automobile Federation, I believe. So there's that from last year. And that all came from, what was it, like doping in sport that was uncovered, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I think that was, it was all around that with the Olympics, wasn't it? And so that was kind of that's a separate thing, like completely to what's actually going on in Russia and Ukraine at the minute. So obviously you've got that kind of controversy that the team walked into last season in 2021. And then obviously this year, Putin decided that, you know, they're going to launch a military exercise, as he calls it, an invasion, as far as everyone else calls it, of Ukraine. And the reason this is particularly kind of succinct and related to F1 is because Uralkali, who are they're like a chemical company. They are, so from my understanding, Vladimir Putin is on the board at Uralkali. The big business meeting that Putin summoned, it's like 35 business leaders, something like that, on the day of the, you know, of the war starting, basically. I think we have to call it for what it is. It is a war at the moment. So Dmitry Mazepin, Nikita's dad, was one of the people invited, one of the 35 or so of business leaders invited, because from my understanding, these are all businesses that are some way tied to the Russian government in some way, shape or form. And actually, the reason I've done quite a lot of reading into Dmitry Mazepin and all this from actually last season, because I was working on a video on a kind of in the same way I did that Cognizant video. I've done videos on numerous, like BWT. I've done videos on various title sponsors, just giving a bit more information about what they are, what they do. And I was going to do one because Nikita joined the team last year. Uralkali was this new sponsor in F1. They've been on F2 cars for a long time. And I was working on that video. I'd had kind of a full script written up. And then the video of Nikita came out last year. And obviously I was just like, well, this clearly isn't like appropriate to be seen to be kind of monetizing off of, especially that was just when that all kicked off. And so I had at the time done a lot of looking into, in terms of research for the video, Uralkali. And yeah, I mean, look, that's the long and the short of it. Because of their particular links and because of individuals' particular links to Putin, these, was it 38? There you go, Nick. 38. In the same way that with Chelsea, so Roman Abramovich appears to have stepped away from Chelsea. He hasn't sold the club, the football club, but he's stepped away, and there's been numerous kind of examples of this. And yeah, obviously, there's kind of two things here. So there's obviously Nikita's links to his father, and then his father's business with Putin. There's the fact that Uralkali, who is one of these big businesses that's connected to Russia, is the not title sponsor, but a big sponsor on the Haas F1 car, and responsible for it being an American F1 team with a Russian livery on it. To less of an extent this year. Obviously, you've had they've now taken off the blue and the red stripes to make it look less Russian, basically. But yeah, it's one of them where you've got that, but then you've also got the sanctions that are coming in, which not only could inhibit Nikita's ability to race in Formula One, and there's talk, I saw an article earlier today, the Ukrainian Motorsport Council has, I'm not sure exactly what they're called, but they've requested to the FIA to, I'm not sure if it's revoke, whatever the right word is, to have a look at the, Russian and Belarusian drivers in terms of their ability to race. So it wouldn't just affect Nikita Mazepin, this affects any Russian driver. So we're talking Robert Schwartzman, we're talking Daniel Kvyat. This isn't just a Mazepin thing. This is a Russian thing. And so there's the question with Uralkali gone, apparently, because Haas were very swift to take the logo off the cars, take it off the motorhomes, to distance themselves straight away, which at first I was quite like, wow, like fair play. But I was like, I always assumed that Uralkali were a significant sponsor on that car. But it seems that Haas took the individual private decision to get that off. And I was watching a video from the race yesterday, and I think they said that they only actually stump up about a fifth of the total budget, Uralkali, that sponsorship deal. That's what I heard from that video. I think I would recommend you double check that yourself though. Which is good, because what we don't want is, look, obviously there's bigger things than people losing their jobs going on right now, okay? But that doesn't delegitimize the fact that we don't want the employees that Haas to lose their jobs because of what's going on. You want people to stay in employment. There's always going to be knock-on effects from these things. And ultimately, it's a good thing, seemingly, that they're not completely reliant on that on that Uralkali sponsorship. But then that opens up the kind of broader question that if Uralkali are now gone from Haas, that relationship's now completely over. And obviously, Nikita being the son of I can't remember Dmitry Mazepin's exact title, but he's top senior CEO, director, whatever. Does that mean that Nikita, who is in that seat because of that money, should lose his seat? Now, what I'm going to do, should Mazepin lose his seat? I'm going to put a live chat. And the thing is, we need to kind of, because I know there's a lot of baggage that comes with Mazepin, okay, because of the controversy, because of what he's done in the past. But we have to look at this. It's almost like we have to look at this as a driver who's clearly a pay driver, who's clearly in the sport because of the money that he brings, and not on merit, but in the same way that like Guan Yu Zhou is in the sport, the same way that Latifi got into the sport as well. They were both drivers who had good but not amazing junior careers. Mazepin had slightly worse junior career probably than both of them, but still won races in Formula 2. Now, the fact that money, that support, bought him the opportunity to get into F1 in the first place, if that money now goes away, should he lose his seat? And I get why it's a difficult one, because obviously it's not, and this is something that needs to be said, like, the Russian people are not at fault for this, okay? The Russian people aren't in control of what Vladimir Putin does, okay? That's clear as day. As much as Nikita's dad has a relationship with Vladimir Putin, that doesn't make Nikita responsible on an individual level for what's going on, clearly. But at the same time, that's the money that bought him the seat and denied it from other drivers who, you look at Oscar Piastri, very much deserves a seat in Formula 1. You look at a driver like Callum Ilott. There's plenty of examples, Nick De Vries, there's plenty of examples of young drivers who haven't got seats, and Mazepin took that seat because of the money. To take that away from him because of something that's out of control might seem harsh on the face of it, but if he didn't have that money, if he didn't have that Uralkali sponsorship in the first place, he wouldn't have got that seat in the first place. So if the reason a driver's there, which is the sponsorship money, if that reason then goes away, then personally, I think Haas are under no obligation to keep him. And again, if this was Guan Yu Zhou, if this was Nicholas Latifi, if Nicholas Latifi, after his first season in F1, the Safina money just went away, okay? His dad just pulled out of sponsoring him. Do I think Williams would be obliged to keep Latifi if there were better options available? I don't think so. I don't think they would be obliged to keep any driver who's not there based on merit. If a driver's there based on the merit of their driving, then fine. But if they're there based on 50% the merit of their driving, but 50% money, and there's another driver who's maybe could be there 80% on merit of driving and 20% money, still brings a bit of money in. I don't think that Haas are obliged to keep Mazepin. And that might seem harsh, but the only reason Mazepin was there was because of the money. And now the money's not there. And I think that's it as far as I'm concerned. So because Mazepin had such an underwhelming 2021, I think that there's not enough there. There's not enough there to justify Haas to be like, okay, we're going to keep him, because clearly there were better options in 2021. There were more complete, more experienced, younger, and more promising drivers that Haas could have picked. They picked Mazepin because he could bring a big chunk of money with him. Now that money's gone. To me, it seems pretty simple. And again, I think it seems harsh because the reason that your Alkali are now out of the picture isn't because of anything Mazepin's done, isn't because it's because of what's going on. It's because of this war. So it's like, it feels harsh to say Mazepin should lose his seat on an individual basis, but I think there's better options out there. And that's the thing, like, again, I think we've established Haas are going to be okay. Whether it's Gene stumps up a bit more money to plug that hole, maybe now with that Russian, because, look, the reality is as well, and, like, in all of this, there's many victims in all of this, but what a group of victims that I think shouldn't be ignored are the Russian people. You've seen the protests around the world, St. Petersburg, Moscow. You know, a lot of Russian people aren't happy about this and feel embarrassed by this, what's going on. And that extends out to the drivers, and that extends out to all Russian. There was the Russian tennis player who was, you know, vocal after his match recently. And that association, there's been a lot of... When did I remember I talked about this in a video a while ago, and I kind of said the same thing that I'm saying now, which is that, you know, a country's government might do bad things, but you can't hold the individual people responsible. Like, you'll see people giving just random Russian people stick in the streets, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, that's just a person. Like, if Boris Johnson decides to just go AWOL and start chucking nukes out everywhere, that's not my fault. And you know what I mean? Like, the actions of a government shouldn't be held, you know, it's easy to just throw, you know, oh, you're Russian, so I'm going to have a go at you. That's nonsense, right? And the association, I think part of the reason Haas have struggled, because there has been a lot of anti-Russian sentiment over kind of recent years, for all the hacking stuff and all that as well. Like, there's been loads in the news. Kaspersky with Ferrari, it's a very good point, Samuel, as well. Obviously, Kaspersky, as far as I'm aware, they aren't tied to the Russian government in the same way that Uralkali are. But obviously, any kind of things that are brought in against Russian commerce, you know, been taken off Swift, all of this stuff, would it affect Kaspersky? Probably in some way. Obviously, a lot of these businesses have different places around the world, right? They don't just have base in Russia necessarily. They might have a location in London and in New York or whatever. But yeah, I think that association being on the Russian Haas has probably put off sponsors in the past. And I don't believe that's right, but I believe that's probably true. Because of all the context and the recent dialogue that kind of comes with that. And I think it's very easy to scapegoat the Russian people and have a pop when actually it's the power-hungry people at the top who are pulling the strings ultimately. And the Russian people don't have a choice. You know, Putin's been in power for, I don't know how many years, 20 odd years, isn't it? But yeah, so look, ultimately, it's a horrible situation. My heart goes out to anyone like who's been affected by this. I'm sure, like, I know I've got some Russian and Ukrainians who watch my stuff, and you know, like, it's horrible what's happening. And this sport becomes this thing where it's just like it's difficult to talk about when something like this is going on. And, you know, wars, unfortunately, are a product of human beings and always have and always will happen. And it's one of them where it can be difficult to be like, oh, how can we complain about an F1 team going under when there's all this going on? But, you know, yes, there's always worse things that are happening in the world. And it's important to not, like, delegitimize people talking about things because, oh, yeah, but there's this going on. It's like, yeah, I get that, but also there's this going on and these people affected. You know, the fact that Ukrainians are having to flee for their lives and, you know, seek asylum is horrible. But also, like, this is going to be, especially with all these sanctions, the Russian people are going to suffer because of their government's recklessness, you know. But yeah, ultimately, I think Mazepin will probably lose his seat, and obviously the circumstances aren't great, and it for him on a personal note for him it will suck for him. But also you've got to, you know, if Mazepin keeps his seat and this war continues to go on, you know, we know the connection between Dmitry and Vladimir Putin, and these questions will just come constantly at him, and you know, would he want to deal with that as well? Like that's going to be tough for him to deal with. You know, I don't agree with what Nikita did in the past. I thought it was horrible. I think he should be held accountable. I don't think he should have got a seat in F1 in the first place. But at the same time, that's all true. That's all true. But he's still a human being. And to be in F1 with all this going on, with your dad so closely linked to what's going on as well, there's going to be so many questions. There's going to be so much scrutiny. And I don't think the value is there. He's not a good enough driver. Like, just facts. He's not a good enough driver. He's not an Oscar Piastri. He's not a George Russell. He's not a Charles Leclerc. He's not a Max Verstappen. He's not a Lewis Hamilton to justify the team bending over backwards to, like, rightly or wrongly, justify keeping him. So the question is, I guess, you know, the team's safe. They've got Schumacher, who's doing a solid job. Who do you think, chat? Do any names jump out to you? Because obviously we've got Pietro Fittipaldi, who's the Haas. He's like the Haas reserve driver. He raced 2 races in 2020 after Grosjean's accident. You've got Antonio Giovinazzi, who obviously reserve at Ferrari now. Just started with Dragon in Formula E. Didn't have a great first race. But obviously has F1 experience. Ferrari, Haas, close connection there. And again, any sanctions that come in to prevent Mazepin from racing, whether or not Haas make an individual decision to swap him for someone else, or if that decision is forced upon them with sanctions, that means Kvyat also couldn't. You couldn't have Kvyat there. You couldn't have Schwartzman there either, who's Ferrari Junior, who could have potentially been an option as well. But yeah, you've got Piastri. A lot of mentions for Piastri, which would make sense. Would it be like a loan deal, like Alpine loan Piastri out to Haas for a year, maybe? Then you would see, like, you would be seeing Alex Albon with Red Bull logo in a Williams with a Mercedes engine, and then you would see Oscar Piastri with an Alpine logo in a Haas with a Ferrari engine. It's just all coming together. Yeah, 66% of you in the live stream have said he should lose his seat, but 34% not. And I get it. It's one of them. I get it from both sides. I do. But obviously, if he does, then Haas will have to evaluate options. I think Piastri would obviously make a lot of sense for Alpine in some way, because then they'd be giving Oscar experience in F1. But could we get the scenario where you've got Oscar Piastri in a Haas battling with Fernando Alonso in an Alpine or Esteban Ocon in an Alpine, and maybe taking points off of Alpine? Because the Haas in testing, it's hard to judge the pace, but maybe that could happen, and that would be a bit of an awkward one, wouldn't it? That would be a bit awkward. Hulkenberg, obviously Hulkenberg's reserve at Aston Martin. Would he want to race at Haas? Maybe. Did a fantastic job when he jumped into that racing point in 2020. Took over Sergio's seat and put it P3 in qualifying at Silverstone. What a madman. And I like Nico. I think he's a kind of solid pair of hands, which you could argue maybe Haas would want that over bringing in Oscar Piastri. Because Piastri, as much as he's looking super, as promising as George Russell, as Charles Leclerc did when they came through F2. But, you know, solid pair of hands, Nico Hulkenberg, proven years of experience. alongside Schumacher, who's still going into only his second year at the team, maybe that's a more solid foundation long term to build on. Callum Ilott, obviously he's joined IndyCar, so you got to think like he's gone to this extent of getting into IndyCar. You know, with the potential of a Haas seat, yes, obviously Ferrari driver, academy driver. Would that be enough to pull him away from what could be? He could build himself a really solid IndyCar career. And Indy's only growing in popularity. He's still young. Would that be a sensible choice for Callum? The fact that he's just got into IndyCar to then leave again to get a Haas seat. You could argue both ways. But yeah, I feel like the drivers, and obviously K-Mag being mentioned. Obviously, he's just started his IMSA career. I don't think K-Mag will come back. He said before he's sick of not winning. He wants to be in a competitive piece of machinery. He's gone to IMSA. He's done a really good job so far in sports cars. I don't think it will be K-Mag. I'd be surprised. De Vries, obviously, De Vries is Mercedes. Mercedes were trying to get him a seat with Williams, but Williams elected to go for Albon instead. Obviously, there's not really a connection there because Haas is Ferrari. But De Vries was F2 champion. You can't look past that. That's a fact. So De Vries could be an interesting shout. Van Dorn as well. I mean, again, I'm not sure. Because of Schumacher still being quite raw, I think a more... If I'm Gunther Steiner, I'm going for a more like... I think experience would be important. And getting Piastri in is all well and good, but you know you're not keeping him long term. So it's almost like... And it's not like you've got any obligation to take him because you're not linked to Alpine. Like in the same way that Leclerc went to Alfa Romeo, did a fantastic job in that one season, and then went up to Ferrari. But obviously Ferrari kind of had part control of one of those seats. So of course they're going to make that happen because they supply the engine. There's not that same relationship there to make the Piastri deal happen. So there's that as well. Any other drivers? Anyone mentioned anyone else? Hulk too expensive. Pato O'Ward. I love Pato. Yeah, there's a name. Seen mentioned. Colton Herta. And this is another thing that's been spoken about because obviously there's a lot of talk of Andretti joining F1 over recent kind of weeks. It's been confirmed that they've launched kind of official interest in joining the sport from 2024, I believe. And look, American teams struggling seemingly. Andretti. I don't know what the Andretti-Haas relationship is like because I know they've been competitors in like the US NASCAR scene for a long time. Would that be able to work? How much are Haas struggling? How much does Gene want to put into the team? This would make a lot of sense from Andretti because then they're buying a team that already exists. But obviously what we'd love to see is an 11th team, I think. I think I speak for most people when I say I'd love to see an 11th team in Formula 1, an Andretti separate team. And Colton Herta doing a fantastic job in IndyCar over he's in his fourth year now. Finished fourth yesterday at St. Petersburg, not Russia, Florida, St. Petersburg. Wasn't there some journalist on Twitter who thought it was IndyCar was actually going to Russia? I seem to see that. But yeah, I mean, obviously I'd love to see Andretti in the sport for sure. I'd love to see Haas in the sport as well. Both would be ideal. But if it came to that, if Andretti were like, we'll make you a great offer, buy the team, stick Colton Herta in one of them seats alongside Mick Schumacher, that would be pretty cool. Théo Pourchaire. Gagan, that's a good shout. Théo Pourchaire, because obviously he is a Sauber Academy driver, which isn't Ferrari, but has links to Ferrari because Alfa Romeo is powered by Ferrari. So he's an Alfa Romeo Sauber driver. Théo Pourchaire. He's very young. That's the thing. Does Haas... That's the thing Haas needs to kind of sort out because they went through that year with Schumacher and Mazepin knowing that they are two rookies, they're going to be quite raw. They came together a lot. They had a lot, they hit each other a few times. There was a lot of beef there. You know, what do Haas want? Because this is their opportunity. And it's like, keeping Mazepin was already a bit of a questionable decision considering how badly he was beaten by his rookie teammate last year. Do they now want to get in another unknown kind of prospect? I think a more experienced driver makes more sense, personally. That's the way I see it. But yeah, who knows? Who knows? Hopefully, whatever is next for Haas, hopefully the team is healthy going forward financially, isn't as reliant on that Uralkali money as I assumed they were, to be honest. And yeah, remains to be seen. Given everything that's happened, yeah, I mean, there's no winners from this situation, is there? There are no winners. And I mean, as far as I've read, they are trying to stage some talks between the Ukrainian and Russian governments. So hopefully that can lead to things calming down, because there are no winners from war. That's for sure. But yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up, everyone. Thank you all for joining me live on the YouTube channel, on the Cool Down Podcast YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. I know a lot of you might not even known there was a Cool Down Podcast channel. I've moved the podcast to here. We've had one every single week since the start of the year, starting with Noel Miller. What a banger. We had Mike Caulfield on last week, ex-Haas F1 strategy director, head of race strategy. Amazing. Such a good chat with him. Would recommend you listen to that after this. Really good one. But yeah, thank you all for coming. I appreciate you all. 5 stars if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Pixo or MySpace or Bebo or whatever. Thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, I'm done. I'm out of here. Goodbye, everyone. Stay safe, be well, be happy. And I don't have an outro for these podcasts. And that is now my outro. Goodbye.